Welcome to the Top Order podcast. It's going to be an England-themed evening this evening. Myself and Jamie doing a review of the 2024 season for the England men's cricket team, both red and white ball, and we'll have a preview of what to expect, if we can even begin to predict what to expect with Bazball in 2025. All coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. Well, mate, as I said in the little intro there, the boys are going to be doing a similar thing with the Black Caps' fortunes over season 2024, leading into 2025. So I guess first and foremost, a happy new year to all in the Barker household. May it bring you glad tidings for 2025. We're going to talk a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit of England for the next sort of 30 or 40 minutes or so. And just as I look at my notes, I get my crick info alert, which I think you've just alluded to, that Jimmy Anderson is going to wind up and wants to carry on playing until he's 73, I think. But we're probably not going to talk a heck of a lot about Jimmy Anderson, other than to perhaps reference his involvement up until the middle of the English summer. But if we just kind of look at the pure numbers through the course of 2024, first and foremost, and we'll probably spend the majority of our time talking about red ball cricket. A record of 9 wins and 8 losses across the year. So we started what seems a long time ago back in India with a 4-1 loss, and then a home sit summer against West Indies and Sri Lanka, where we got 5-1 up, I suppose, over that 6 test match summer. And then a bit of a mixed bag across the winter, a 2-1 win in New Zealand most recently, and then a 2-1 loss in Pakistan. So ledger almost even, but certainly in terms of the ebbs and flows of Test cricket, we'll come and talk about that. White ball was a little bit different. So a year dominated really by a T20 World Cup where, let's face it, England were pretty poor, nearly crashing out to Scotland if rain hadn't have potentially intervened, just scraping through into a semi-final where, let's be honest, we got our arses handed to us by India. And then in the bilaterals, 4 games, so 4 wins, 4 losses across ODIs, West Indies and Australia in 2024. And then T20, bilateral T20, 6 wins and 2 losses. Tied series against Australia, and then, wins against the West Indies and Pakistan. But first and foremost, Jamie, you framed this question really, really well. And it's around what you wish for, isn't it? So if we kind of look back on 2024 from a Test cricket perspective, 9 wins, 8 losses. And if we kind of look at the series, the series synopsis there, we've got 3 series wins, 2 at home. And then we've then got our losses and heavy losses away to India and Pakistan, and then a win away in New Zealand. What do you make of the 2024 Test year first and foremost for England?
Yeah, I mean, when you explain it as 9 and 8, it's probably not. It's probably not as strong as you might infer, or you might sort of reflect on, given probably some of the scintillating cricket that England have played, but also on the flip side of that, some of the pretty infuriating, perhaps, cricket that has been played. I think my question, before we went on, was around, as a fan, what you have to be careful what you wish for. I think sometimes, and if Bazball is what we're after and we like it because it's exciting, you're not quite, it's like the Forrest Gump, it's life's a box of chocolates. Then we have to accept that we probably go through years winning 9 and 8, or maybe losing 8 and 9, and that's how it is. And we'll win a series, but also lose series, or we get an England team that is kind of less highs and lows and a bit more mundane. It's a bit more kind of 75% on any given Sunday. And I guess as a consumer, if you're going to go to one day of Test cricket per summer, you probably don't want to see the turgid mundane. You probably want to see the swashbuckling and the innovation. So I think I've not really answered your question around the reflection of the year, other than I actually thought the numbers were probably better than that in terms of the amount of tests that we would have won. But actually, when you look at it, like you say, we lost heavily away at India. You know, subcontinent still remains a challenge for us as it does for many other nations, I think, apart from maybe some of the early games in Pakistan where, you know, it was like batting on the M6, I guess, at times. So, um, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I kind of come up with this idea of, you know, as fans, do we want the roller coaster or do we want the kind of the old steam engine that's, you know, pretty reliable and, you know, is going to get you from A to B, or do you want the roller coaster where you've got the ups, the downs, the dips, and you know, the spectacular? You know, it's hard, isn't it? As a fan, I think I ear towards the roller coaster. I think because that's probably what, you know, I want bang for my buck, I guess, when I go and you know, go to a test match. But yeah, what do you think, mate?
Yeah, I think looking at the results in sort of binary form, look, I don't think is super useful. If I kind of look at the way that those series broadly got set up, if I look at India as the starting point, it's the kind of hope that kills you, isn't it? We won that
Yeah.
first test match in India. Fantastic innings from Ollie Pope. I think it got 190 odd in that first game. And then really we got a combination of bumrud and spun out over three
Mm.
games and didn't really look at the races for the rest of the series. And then I think again when you kind of go to Pakistan, a 2-1 loss in Pakistan, again, first game of that series was the 800, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
that fantastic innings from Harry Brook, and then again we got undone by two very very wily career spinners, didn't we? In Pakistan, the off spinner and
Mm.
the left armer, and I think when I kind of look at that's the thing that you just crave a little bit of. And even when you then fast forward to our most recent performances in New Zealand, where we were convincingly 2-0 up in the series and then lost the final test match. What you're wanting as a fan is probably to be greedy. To answer your question,
Mm.
you kind of want that swashbuckling, entertaining cricket, but you always want to win when you're doing it, and you want to see that. I know the word's been used a heck of a lot. That ruthlessness of the
Mm.
team to go and actually then put that series to bed. But then when I actually look at it and try and look at it objectively, you look at all the furor around Sam Constas coming into this Australian team, and parallels, of course, with Bazball. This is Australia scoring at 3.5, nearly 4 and over, whereas England have been scoring at 4.5, nearly 5 and over for a concerted period of time now. So we're not comparing apples with apples, and I guess probably, what we want is that consistency of the Australian juggernaut from the late 90s through to probably, 2003, 2004, when we took that earn off them in 05. That's probably, what you sort of class as dominant, but it wasn't as entertaining as some of the cricket that the guys have been playing over the course of the last 2 years. So I think for me, it is, as you said, if I'm going to go and spend a couple of days at the cricket, I would probably rather see us implode and it be super entertaining than see a turgid day's cricket.
Mm.
And certainly, you'd rather see them go out and innovate and swashbuckle and do what they've been doing. So, as a fan, I think you're coming round to the fact that it is an entertainment product, particularly the amount of money you're watching, paying either on the gate or through the 17 subscriptions that you now need to watch
Yeah.
to watch any sport, really. So, for me, I'm really, really bought into Bazball, and I think what we've got to do is probably just have some of that frustration where, they aren't able to maintain those very, very high risk levels
Mm.
for 23 days in a series. And that's what that's what we'd probably rather see, isn't it? We'd probably rather see a test series of 25 days where, England edge 14 of them, and, there's 11 that are, perhaps go against us, then probably see a series where it's a bit more balanced and yeah, to use that word again, turgid through the course of a summer.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you know what do successful teams do? You know, if we think of other sports, successful teams do are consistent, but they often have the innovation, they have the creativity. It is that kind of perfect storm that you're after. It's hard to come by, it's hard to develop. It feels like that England are kind of like two-thirds of the way there. the bit that is a bit of a concern is kind of how we finish series. We you know, if we're going in, like, I know we're going to talk about the forthcoming year, but if we're going in to a three-match series 1-1, I'm not sure I necessarily back us too much to finish well, and I don't really know where that comes from, other than the evidence probably supports that. But it's kind of interesting that, we do really well in these first test matches. Like you said, 800 in Pakistan, win the first test in India, and it's almost like the kind of the energy that costs to kind of hit the ground running and to really go out and blitz the opponent, almost then feels like they never quite catch up with it. I don't know. I could be reading too much into this, but it feels like there's a big investment of mental and physical effort, and then as the series progresses, it can kind of feel, just run out of steam a little bit. And I mean, I'm sure that isn't the case. I'm sure it's more kind of, maybe poor shot selection, the opposition playing better, pitch conditions, these type of things. But there is a bit of a trend there that arguably there's a bit of a tailing off, and you do wonder, particularly away as well. You're touring for a long period of time, workload of players, all the stuff away, being away from friends and family, all of this. It is going to have an impact. But I think, as we look forward to the Ashes, we wouldn't want to be, you know, two each going into Sydney. Well, I'd probably take that,
I would as well, actually. Yeah.
but I'm not sure how restful that fifth test match would be, from an observer
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, I think again when you've been really objective about it, you look at the home summers that we've had probably the last 2 or 3 years. 5-1 this summer. We go
Yeah.
back to that, that first summer where Johnny Bairstow was in that really rich vein of form against South Africa, India, and New Zealand, and we were truly dominant.
Mm,
I think it's easy to kind of get carried away when you kind of look at that sort of the macro 9-8, but it feels as if every game's been a 50-50
mm,
game, no matter what the performance in the previous game. There hasn't been that necessarily that momentum. It's almost like this mantra of live with your feet on the ground means that when you come to the next game, it genuinely is a 50-50. It's anyone can win, and you probably would see that reflected in the betting odds, that there isn't that sort of necessarily form being the factor that's going to predict the winner of the game, which you would have seen, I think, where you've got those dominant Australian and Indian sides where, if they are 2-0 up in a series, they're probably strong favourites that they're going to win the third game. Whereas against England, the flip side, of course, is that England can turn up and turn you over even if you are 2-0 up in a series. So
yeah,
um,
yeah.
it's really difficult to be a fan and sort of judge it with the metrics of what we probably grew up with through the 1990s, Jamie, and
Mm,
the 2000s with, would you rather watch Atherton and Butcher and Thorpe and Hick and John Crawley, or would you rather watch, Ben Stokes and Zak Crawley and the guys in the side now? And yeah, I don't need you to answer that, but I think we know what the answer would be from an
yeah.
entertainment perspective.
And
And
even you even touched on the great Australian team, and they weren't Bazball-esque, but they were certainly entertaining. But they were just a machine, weren't they? They were just a well-oiled machine that would, as you said, use a ruthless word. They would detect critical moments in a test match and, all collectively come together and get over that line and almost thrive in those moments where. Um, but they've probably got some of the greatest players ever to play men's cricket. So it's probably a culmination of the gods and the universe coming together for the Australians. Like, we'll hope I never see that again.
look, yeah, absolutely, here, and Baldy's not here to
He's
chip in.
not. No.
If we talk a little bit about personnel through the course of the Test match year, it's been relatively settled. It would be fair to say. I think obviously we had a pretty high profile retirement during the course of the English summer in Jimmy Anderson bowing out with 704 wickets, four in his final game, and yeah, dropping a catch that would have been a bit of a fairy tale for Pfeiffer. But we obviously saw, from Anderson to Atkinson, we saw an emergence of probably a guy that looks like he's going to be able to lead that attack. Who who do you think's finished the year in strong credit out of this England Red Bull side, and then where are you? Yeah, where are your question marks? Where are you? Yeah, where are your people that might not yet just be renewing their Qantas frequent flyer points for the winter?
Yeah, I think Atkinson is one I'd go with. I think he's definitely got credit in the bank. I think, you just look at his action, it looks highly repeatable. I think his short ball's quite difficult to pick when he gets just because of the action he has. There's no real discernible difference. He's quite Archer-esque, isn't he, in terms of it's close to the stumps, kind of an, very fluid action. Comes a lot from the wrist. I think he's done well. I would expect him to do well in Australia given the conditions. Um, he's had experience now using the Kookaburra as well, so I think that stands him in good stead. Um, I think the top order is still a bit of a worry. I think for me, I think it's kind of a bit hit and miss with Crawley. I'm a big fan of Duckett, but I do have a concern. And maybe this is an old perspective, but the Australians will come hard, small player, like like I just that'd be a concern for me. But he's shown that he is able and he can adapt, and I wouldn't want to. I'm a big fan. I think again, sort of Crawley, where on his day can look unplayable, and then in an innings a day later it looks like you know not quite as assured. And I think the Australians will probably target him if he's on the plane. It's notorious that they'll go hard at players that they think are slightly vulnerable. I think Root just goes from strength to strength. I think we've touched on in the past, in previous episode, this kind of idea that he hasn't scored 100 in Australia. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what. Yeah, I imagine the Australian media will go after that and use that in some way as a early doors. But I would expect him to come through with shining, yeah, with shining colours. Really, yeah, I'm just trying to think. I'm going to pass over to you because I don't want to hog this. But yeah, I suppose Atkinson, Duckett, Root, Bashir. I think we've sort of eulogised over him in previous episodes as well, that we feel that he's got the attributes. He's done well in tough conditions as well, non-spin bowler friendly, and he's been able to do a role more than an Ashley Giles role, I would say. He's not there just to bowl outside leg stump. He looks like he's attacking. He's got good players out and fairly placid wickets as well. So I think, he's done well for me as well. But yeah, over to you, mate.
Yeah, look, I'd probably echo a lot of your sentiment. I think obviously, yeah, without sort of going through the whole team list, we've got some guys that are absolutely nailed on. Harry Brook, world class. I think we've just seen the emergence of a couple of really young guys as well, or three maybe, two with the bat. Sorry, two with the ball and one with the bat. So Jamie Smith, I think, comes back in straight away. There's no question there that he picks up the gloves again. But I think probably the biggest plus I can see over the course of the last 3 or 4 months for England has been the dual emergence, and it's a continuance really for Atkinson. Yeah, he's been superb now, I think, for nearly 12 months. But Brydon Cast has been
Mm.
really, really impressive, and I think that just gives me a great deal of confidence that there's two guys now that I think can be part of that attack, certainly through the summer, and also into the Ashes in the winter as well. And I think what's more important with the fact that we've identified those two guys is that where I've got some question marks, I think the question marks that I've got are really just around how form transpires. I think from a character perspective, I cannot fault the character of the guys that have been being picked. So you look
Yeah.
at Shoaib Bashir. I think they've unearthed someone that's got, you would call it mental resilience. I'm sure, Jamie. And it's the same with, it's the same with Matthew Potts. It's the same with Jack Leach. It's the same with a number of the players that have been picked in and around this squad. But it's really going to be a test of character for, I think, Bashir and Crawley, and to an extent Duckett, as they come under the pressure that they're going to come under. Australia are going to target the guys at the top of the order. They're going to
Mm.
target Joe Root, as you've talked about, and they're going to target your spinner as well, because they know if they can hit the spinner out of the attack early in the day, then you've got to get your quicks to back up. And that's why it's so important, I think, that we've unearthed a couple of guys who look as if they've got really good engines in Atkinson and Cars. My big worry now, when I sort of look at the way that this side needs to balance itself over the course of the next 12 months, is Ben Stokes and his, ongoing injury worries.
Mm.
So, he's pinged a hamstring twice now. I don't doubt his work effort, his rehab. You cannot sort of talk highly enough about the way that he's going to prepare himself to get back to full fitness. But if he isn't fit to play that full part, it really does create some balance issues, as well as those kind of talismanic issues. If he's not in the side, we looked very, very different with Ollie Pope as captain, I think, through those test matches in the summer. So for me, it really does come down to character. I don't think there's too many players that we need to have any question marks that they're going to be able to perform on the stage that we want them to perform on. And I don't think he even mentioned Jacob Bethel there, who,
No.
I mean, yeah, the boys
Yeah.
will always have a pop at me for making really, really bold statements, but in Jacob Bethel, I think we've got him and Harry Brook are both nailed on for 8,000 test runs for me.
Yeah.
They're quality players. I'm really, really excited about seeing them performing together in England shirts over the course of the next 10 years. We look as if we've got the next cabs off the rank from a batting perspective, with Smith as well to throw into that mix as well.
Yeah, no, completely. Some great points, mate. It's interesting. I'm just thinking about, how Australia notoriously do target, those key people. They'll always go for the captain or the best player. They'll go for the openers and they'll go for the spinner, and you just, I think, in previous series, I've felt sorry for some of the players, because once I think, the only exception in recent times would be Alistair Cook, and Michael Vaughan probably, where they were able to overcome that barrage and really, give it back to them. But we've seen lots of players over the years that, that first test, they get out early in the first innings, second innings they get out early, and you think, oh, it's tough then. That's a real test of your mettle then. Can you, as an opener, can you come back? Can you come back from that? Because it's just going to ramp up, And I agree with you. I think there's some really strong characters though. um, I don't think they take themselves too serious as well. I think that's good. I think like they kind of live and die by the sword, as we've said. So I think that they'd be happy to accept getting caught on the pole or getting caught on the sort of the aerial cut third man. I think that's. Yeah, that's probably a breath of fresh air in comparison to previous tours where, if that had have happened, it'd been like, oh, geez, you're pulling Mitchell, um, what's his name? I've forgotten his
Mitchell
name.
Stark.
Mitchell Stark and Mitchell Johnson. Yeah, there we are, complete brain fart. Yeah, and there'd have been sort of real carnage kicking off about that. But I think now there's an acceptance they're going to play that way. They don't take themselves too serious. So actually, they're probably in a stronger position to kind of deal with it, maybe mentally. But yeah, be interesting. The spinner's a key one, isn't it? If you go for I don't know 40 off your first 3 overs, 4 overs, that's a long day in the dirt then for your quicks.
Yeah.
That's the role of the spinner. It is to sort of take time out of the game to give the quicks the bit of the recovery time that is needed. So I think that'd be a learning curve for Bashir, perhaps. Just modifying his role. It's not always about taking wickets necessarily. It's about taking time out of the game just to give the other guys a bit of a rotation, and yeah, enable them to come back for that final session and burst if they need to later on in the day. So, yeah,
And
over to you.
before we move on and talk a little bit of white ball cricket, Jamie, we've got, I guess, 11 test matches. We've got a one-off test against Zimbabwe, I think,
Yeah,
as a tune-up, and then 5 tests against India, and then the Ashes. Two things. What is success, do you think, across those 10 test matches for England to kind of exit 2025? And secondly, are there any bolters or any, people that we've not necessarily talked too much about? I think we'll see obviously Mark Wood if he's fit back in the reckoning, Jofra Archer I think back in the reckoning, probably Chris Wokes as well, who I don't think we mentioned, but
Mm.
outside of those guys, and probably your spare batter as a Jordan Cox, in that sort of arena. He was meant to obviously keep wicket in New Zealand and bat in that top 6 or 7, didn't due to injury. But yeah, what's success like over those 10 test matches, do you think? What are you going to bank as an England fan? And then anybody else that you think is a bit of a bolter for
Mm.
selection throughout the course of the summer against India, who will be not quite rebuilding, but they'll, by the looks of it, be without Rohit Sharma and definitely be without Ravichandran Ashwin through that summer. But we've talked a lot about their strength in depth. I don't think they're going to struggle with the likes of Akshar Patel, Washington Sundar, and
Yeah,
folks
yeah.
like that. Not to mention the batting strength that they've got. But yeah, success and any bolters.
Yeah, success. I think it really depends on how much emphasis, probably answering my own question, is placed on the Ashes. And I can see almost like the India series potentially just being a warm up. I hope it isn't, but I can see it being a bit of a warm up to kind of, really refine strategy, really refine um orders and rotations and things like that. I can see it fall. And to be brutally honest, why not? Like if the if the critical thing is the Ashes and to win down there, then you kind of want to do everything you can, and we're better to prepare for that than actual test matches. And no one's going to come out and say that's what they're doing, of course, but it feels like that's a natural lab environment to kind of rehearse and practice some stuff. And with that, though, of course, you're going to get the good, the bad, and some extremely ugly, probably because they are experimenting. Or they may say, no, we know what the strategy is. We know exactly what our plans are for Australia, and we're gonna gain momentum by playing well, not necessarily winning, but playing well against India to then build into that Ashes series. So I think they're sort of two sort of schools of thought for me is that, depending on where they think they're at, that they either use the India series as a way of further finessing some of their ideas and strategy, or they go, yeah, we're good, and you know, we try and build a summer of momentum. And we've spoken in the past about how confidence will just is always dictated by what you've done last, or is often dictated by what you've done previously. So if you're going into an Ashes summer or an Ashes tour having, played well and not lost the series against India, that's probably quite a good predictor of what you're going to feel like in that first test match. In terms of some of your bolters, I've probably just got a bit of a Leicestershire cap on, I guess, but I'll be interested to see the role that, Rahan Ahmed has during the summer, and equally Josh Hull, regain his fitness. Had a decent debut. Was unfortunate with injury, but I think of the left arm quick, got the opportunity to swing it both ways. Whether he would make it on a plane to Australia, probably a bridge too far, I guess. Um, but who knows? Who knows? You get on a roll in the summer, you get a few games in, and anything can happen. But they'd be two that I'd potentially, they've been in and around the mix. I'd just be interested to as a spinner, ex spin bowler. I'm always You can never have enough of them, so I'd love to see probably a leg spinner
Yeah,
in the England setup at some point, and take them to Australia. Because you never know, particularly Sydney, notorious two spinners. It wouldn't be great to play two spinners in that at 2 all, and yeah, I'm not sure any of us would get any sleep, would we? But yeah, how do you see it, mate?
yeah. Look, I probably don't quite have the same Leicestershire link as you, so I think the guy that I've really liked the look of has been Jack Carson from Sussex, so the off spinner. I think 50 wickets last year, gives it a real tweak as well, like really spins the ball hard. So I think if they're looking on those depth charts, I wonder whether they're potentially looking at him as, if there's an injury to Bashir. I think from a seamer's perspective, yeah, look, there's going to be other people that need to get on that plane, whether it's Josh Tongue, whether it's Josh Hull,
Mm.
whether it's Matthew Potts. We're going to need that, that battery and that list of probably 10 fast bowlers over the course of the next 12 months, and I think we'll see people, rotate in and out. And I think what's really interesting for me is what role do we see Chris Wokes playing? Because
Yeah.
I think by the fact they've stuck him and kept him around, they see him as someone that can lead the attack in terms of that nous and that skill set. Whether or not they're brave enough to give him a new Kookaburra, and he's going to need to get the most out of that new Kookaburra ball for a
Yeah.
dozen overs or so, 2 or 3 times during the course of the series if he's going to be effective. So, and then look, success for me, I think I expect to beat India at home. I expect the brand of cricket that we play and the home conditions and the personnel that we've got. If we get those 15 guys there or thereabouts fit and firing, regardless of Jasprit Bumrah and the quality in that Indian side, I'd expect us to have enough in home conditions. But
Mm.
then, yes, I think you're right. It is building towards that Ashes, and I think the key for me is having 8 or 9 guys from a bowling perspective that are fit enough to get on that plane. And then probably, from a fitness perspective, again, a fitness and form perspective is making sure that 6 or 7 of the batters that have been afforded the opportunities over the course of the last 2 years, that they're on that plane as well. Yes, we can't legislate for a broken digit here or there or an injury. But I think if that personnel is there and thereabouts, then England have got to give this a red hot crack over the course of the next 12 months or so. Um,
Just on the fitness one, it will be interesting to how we handle Mark Wood,
yeah,
because I think what do you want there? You want him fit for Australia, but you probably need to get some overs in the leg. So it'd be interesting how he's handled. I think whether we see him early summer and then putting his feet up, or whether we see him not doing too much early summer, finishing later summer, and then straight on the plane type of thing. I think that could be a sort of a fascinating sideshow in terms of how he's managed.
yeah, him and Jofra in the same
Yes,
breath, really. Yeah, absolutely.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Let's finish up, Jamie, and talk a little bit of white ball cricket. So, yeah, a really poor World Cup campaign, I think it's fair to say. We weren't convincing throughout the course of that World Cup, and yeah, culminating in that semi-final defeat, as we said. Um, Baz coming in as coach, all formats coach for England, which I don't think we ever would have expected. And we've not really seen what he's going to do to stamp things on the side, other than perhaps the naming of that Champions Trophy squad. So England so far the only team to put some pen to paper, with Josh Buttler obviously retaining the captaincy, but we don't know whether he'll retain the gloves for white ball cricket. Phil Salt has had a
mm,
phenomenal year, really, hasn't he? Both
yeah,
with bat and gloves, and then we've got those guys in the squad that we've just talked about: Jofra and Gus Atkinson and Mark Wood and Jamie Overton. We've retained the likes of Adil Rashid. Saqib Mahmood, I think, has been superb, and I've got a little watch and an eye on him as a potential 3 format player for England. Yeah, bowls at pace, reminds me a little bit of a Simon Jones type character. Gets
yeah.
close to stumps, reverses the ball, and then some crossover as well in terms of that Test match batting now. So when you kind of look at that list, you've got Harry Brook, you've got Joe Root, you've got Jacob Bethel, you've got Ben Duckett, you've got Jamie Smith, all Test red ball players now that you'd say are inked into that Test squad, are also in that one day or white ball setup as well. But I guess my overarching question is: did we expect to see more of a revolution following that poor showing in the World Cup, or is this kind of evolution of that the right approach for England as we go into a Champions Trophy year for white ball cricket?
Yeah, it's such a contrast, isn't it, the white ball in terms of where we're at, I think. Like red ball, we kind of know broadly what we're going to get, but with the white ball, it does. I, I, I look at it, I go, I'm not actually sure what the strategy was or has been. You'd like to think that would become clearer, now McCullum is at the helm, but will it be a carbon copy of Bazball as we know it, or will it be a, Bazball, 2.0 type thing? And what does that look like? Is it still based around this idea of getting people to play with freedom and no consequence and go and express themselves? I think you look at that lineup, they're certainly capable. I think that's the disappointing thing about the white ball performances perhaps this year. You look at the lineup and some of the players that have been available for England, and it's just flattered to deceive a little bit. It's kind of they've not probably lived up to their billing yet. When they go to the IPL and other franchise tournaments, they're able to really execute their skills and really put in dominant performances. So I feel that England have perhaps been a little bit lost in terms of their white ball. Um, and maybe they're still finding their feet at the moment. With It's interesting, some of the older players being brought back. It's the coach is clearly wants to work with players that he trusts, that buy into probably the way in which he works, and maybe he feels that they can perhaps mentor some of the younger players in terms of that approach. It feels like maybe to go forwards, you sort of need to go backwards a little bit by bringing in some of your older, more experienced players that probably aren't going to play one day cricket for, more than 18 months. But you've got to do that to bring in your strategy and have role models in that environment that can then help the next generation. And then that will then cascade on and so forth. That could be the line of thought. But yeah, it's going to be interesting with the ICC. I think we'll have a better idea, I guess, won't we? What kind of brand we're looking at here? Are we going to see England really try and change the game, as it were, like they've sort of done in Test cricket? Like they're going to come up with, you know, over rates and things like that are we've not seen before. I don't know is the honest answer. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I think it feels, as I say, just to reiterate, it feels like we've got to sort of go back a little bit in terms of our personnel, not go back in terms of quality, go back in terms of like maybe yeah, bringing people back into the frame to then go forward. And I have no problem with that, because the players that are coming in are exceptional cricketers, able to play all formats. Um, Probably the challenge is going to be in 18 months, 2 years' time, when maybe those players aren't as readily as available. And you'd like to think in that time we'd have a clearer direction. But yeah, I mean, how do you see it? I mean, what are you? Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think some points. Yeah, certainly some echoes of the points that you've made. I think the overarching thing is I don't really know what to expect.
Mm,
So yeah, I don't know whether we're going to see McCullum come in and try and do something completely different with the game, and I don't know, do what Sri Lanka did to the game back in the
yeah,
mid
yeah.
1990s, and have a completely radical approach that we don't know what it might be. But ironically, I think that the white ball game is the one that is probably suited a little bit more to guys really understanding their roles, really looking at the analytics and the matchups and the kind of things that have become such a big part of white ball cricket over the course of the last 10 years. So I wonder whether actually we do need to come into it with some, really, really strong planning, particularly around the roles that players are going to play, what overs they're going to bowl if they're bowling, what fields are going to be set, and actually to not necessarily have the same level of freedom of decision making as
Mm,
we've had in the Test cricket side. It's almost been let the batters go out and do it exactly how they feel they can win a game of cricket in a Test match. Whereas in the white ball game, it probably is going to be a little bit more. What we need from you now is a strike rate of this over this period, please,
mm,
and hit to this side and take this guy out of the attack and get this guy in at the other end and allow us to have Liam Livingstone at the death for 43 balls or whatever the mathematics says is the best, the best way to win that game. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see if McCullum tears up the rule book and comes in and tries something completely radical. Or whether it actually is going to be a little bit more formulaic, which I think we've seen that in the white ball game, that the analytics has been such a big part of it, and it seems as if it's been such a little part of what the Test cricket phenomenon has been over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. In terms of personnel, I still think we've got some class players in there. I think there's been a workload conversation probably to an extent around Joe Root. Trying to prolong his Test career. I think now if he wants to play, he's certainly in the ODI setup one of the guys that should be inked in onto that lineup for me. So yeah, he plays if he wants to play. My question mark is really Buttler. He's had some injury worries. He's still absolutely class. I still think he's the right man to lead the team, particularly with the backing of Brendon McCullum. And I really just hope that McCullum unclips his wings a little bit and allows him to have a little bit of a swan song. Because if there's an England cricketer that I think that deserves that, that 3 or 4 year cherry on the career cake, it's Jos Buttler. He's been sensational for us since probably 2017, 2018, leading into that 50 over World Cup winning story that we don't talk about too often on a New Zealand based cricket podcast.
What are your thoughts on Livingston? Because I'm it's kind of a loaded question, but do you think we get the best out of him? Because I was just thinking about your role perspective there. I often look at him and I go, this guy is the diamond, but I often feel as though he's perhaps not always got the clarity, and maybe he has, but it looks like he bowls his off spin, then he can bowl his leg spin, and then he can nail it, and then he can finish, and then he can pinch it, and it's like. I just get a sense there if you use some analytics, maybe, and kind of give him a really clearly defined role, I think you'd maybe end up getting more. I don't know. That's I get slightly frustrated because I go, here's a guy here that he just should be. Yeah,
Yeah, mate, I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I've been calling for his head for a long time. Not quite calling for his head. That's harsh, but I've been frustrated that his quality hasn't really transcended into big
Yes,
game performances. I think
yeah,
he's had some fantastic contributions, but for me, he hasn't pieced those together in games that have really, really mattered. But if I look at the last 12 months, he's, I think, from a rankings perspective, well up there as our one of our better white ball players in 2024. And certainly, I think he's been more consistent with that form and that clarity of his role. So yeah, look, I think when I now look at that, this is the 18 months of his career where we really do need to see. He's played at, I think I'm right in saying so somewhere around about sort of 50 T20s now and 30 odd ODIs. Strike
mm,
rates and averages are right in the kind of wheelhouse that they should be. So in ODIs, averaging 35, striking at 112 or thereabouts. T20s averaging 27 at a strike rate of 150.
yeah, yeah,
That's the kind of numbers that we now need to see him do consistently, and we need to see him do it through a ICC tournament,
mm,
not in a brilliant 3 or 4 game streak in a bilateral environment. But I think again, coming back to the comment around McCullum is the guy that
absolutely.
unleashes the confidence in someone that is like Liam Livingstone. So yeah, excited to see what he can do alongside his Lancashire teammate Phil Salt and Jos
Mm,
Buttler actually as we come to
yeah, yeah,
those Lancashire links.
yeah, yeah. Cool.
Um, Mate, I think that probably brings us to the end of this review. If we've got a wish for the year, if you could only be successful in one series, whether it's the Champions Trophy, the Ashes, or that home summer against India, what would you look forward to most? And yeah, if you've got any bold predictions, now's the time to make them, and we'll record them and probably forget about them for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think not to get battered in Australia, like you know, like I'm more optimistic than I have been, but yeah, not to be competitive down there, and I'd love us to, I'd obviously love us to win the Ashes down under. For me, I still think it's the hardest thing in cricket to do. Yeah, well, there's only one team that can do it, two teams that can do it, but I still think it's the hardest thing in world cricket to do as an English team is to go to Australia and win. So I think that would be massive. What do I think we can do it? I'm not going to predictions wise. Yeah, yeah, it's tricky. Heart would say 2-1. Ed would probably say we lose 2-1 or 3-1. Probably, but the heart would. I'd love a 2-1, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Win it in Sydney as well, so that'd be nice.
brilliant. Well, look, I hope that comes true. Yeah, for me, exactly the same, mate. Yeah, we're not going to have any difference of opinion on this pod. The end of this year is the biggest frontier, I think, for this cricket team, and I think puts a bookend on McCullum's tenure, I think, as England
Mm,
coach. I can't see there's any reason that he would continue on either way after that Ashes. I think that this is a natural, cycle. It might be that it continues with the white ball side after that.
yeah,
Particularly if we've got that transition of the likes of Brook and Bethel and these guys into the white ball side. But look, I genuinely think that this is our best chance down under
yeah, yeah.
since 2011, when we obviously last went and conquered that frontier. I think the Australian side have got just that little bit of question mark around their batting lineup at the moment. We've got, Constance, who's looked brilliant coming into things, but again, we've just seen them pick their squad for Sri Lanka, and McSweeney, who had a tough baptism, has come back into the squad. Usman Khawaja, don't know how much longer he's going to go on for, and we've had some question marks around the form of Marnus Labuschagne and to a lesser extent Steve Smith. So I think there's an opportunity there that we've got a real chance against their batting lineup with our bowling attack. It's just whether our batting lineup can combat their bowling attack, I think, is going to be the key. But yeah, it's the best chance that we've got, and I am actually going to go out on a limb and say I think we're going to pip that series as well, at the end of the year, and that would be the best Christmas present for me for 2025.
What's your series prediction then? I've gone 2-1.
Mate, I've not got the long range weather forecast yet for November and
Okay.
December, so I really don't know.
Okay.
But we've certainly seen it be pretty wet in Sydney of late. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think it'll be a close series. So I think if the weather holds fair for 5 Test matches, I think we'd see 5 results. So yeah, it's a 3-2, and if it doesn't, it's one of those scenarios where it might be a rain game somewhere and a 2-1. So yeah, I definitely see it being a really, really close series down
A
under.
3-2, a 3-2 would be amazing. That
It
would be that would be fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
it
Yeah,
would.
winner takes all in Sydney. That would be the icing on the cake.
Well, even better, mate, going in 3-0 into Melbourne and then just having
Well,
a bit of a party. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'd probably take the 3-0, but as a spectacle,
yeah.
like, yeah, 2-all going into Sydney. Wow, yeah, that could be tasty. Yeah.
Right. Well, mate, really good to talk with you. We wouldn't get away with this kind of crap if the other guys were here. That's for sure. With this hyperbole and jingoistic England behaviour. But look, I'm sure Baldy will bring us back down to earth with some real statistics and reasoned argument on the next podcast. But there will be plenty more cricket in your feed from the Top Order boys. We'll have This Week in Cricket. We'll also have the New Zealand boys talking about the Black Caps summer. So a review and a preview of 2025 from a Black caps perspective. And then, yeah, when Baldy returns from his summer holidays, we'll all be back on the pod as well for more cricketing news, views, and interviews from all around the world. But for now, it is good night and God bless from us all here, or both here on the Top Order Podcast UK edition. We'll see you soon. Good night.